Hello, my name is Michael Aponte. This is my Reading Rainbow video for children's literature. The piece of text I decided to go with for this project is If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, written by Laura Jove Numeroff, illustrated by Felicia Bond. I wanted to go with a story I didn't really read as a kid. I work in a school, so I was able to just browse through the library. Ultimately, I was looking for two things when I was looking for a story for this project. One, it just had to give me a feel like I want to read it, you know, based off the images and kind of how welcoming it feels. And also, too, I wanted to choose a story that after I read it, it's a type of message uh, I would like to kind of spread to others and pretty much recommend them to read, you know. Um, and this is a children's book, however, the morals and message I feel that's portrayed in this book, I feel could be beneficial for adults as well, right? But let's get the formalities out the way, then we'll get to that. Speaking off the size of the book alone, you could tell it's not much bigger than my hand, kind of around the same area. This lets you know it's not tremendously big, however, not insanely small. So it does give that kind of intimate feel if you want to read it alone. However, it's big enough, and the way the images and the text are, how it's horizontally displayed, right, with the illustrations being paired with a piece of text together as well, makes it have that kind of like presentation like display where if you want to read it to an entire class or maybe a child is sharing with its peers to read along, right? So it's kind of like a happy middle with the size of it. It did give me that welcome kind of warm feeling when I saw the pictures and kind of opened it and made me feel like it was very simple to read, very exciting and entertaining to interact with. So I know that was a great indicator that this is a children's book that could be beneficial to the population. Um, Ultimately, if we're looking at the pictures itself, right, and how much it takes up of the page, the illustrator utilized the entire page, right? It's not like there's a specific margin where there's cutoffs and things like that. However, at the same time, there's a tremendous amount of white space still there, right? So although the images utilize the entire page, it still was a lot not used. This kind of implies that although the illustrator provided us with these detailed drawings, they didn't want the reader to get too distracted with overly complex illustrations or with too much going on the page, right? Each image is strict to the piece of text that's provided with that image, therefore letting you know that the images go hand in hand with the text, and the images is going to fill in any loose end or empty holes we have from the text to kind of help aid in any reader's interpretation of this story, right? On top of that, with the amount of white space it's having, and although it's very straightforward in the message it has, the detailing of it in terms of the color usage and the line usage allows the readers to still be able to interact with it nicely and kind of have us develop our own interpretation, right? Although this is a children's book who is very simplistic in its art, right? In terms of how the illustration is strictly representing the text, it also shows very key details that the text won't give us, like emotion, right? So the illustrator used fine lines, you could tell, just enough to give us those little details of emotion and feelings of intensity or things being hectic and overwhelming, right? The color usage, it gave me a rustic type feeling where some of the colors are faded. However, it's still at the same time so vibrant and bright that you could feel the intensity and the entertainment that you're going to feel from this story, right? You see the mouse just constantly getting himself into things as the boy's tending. And this page alone, I mean, I love the shading that you have from the book here to the crayons, how the page is coming off of the entire book itself from the bottom, as you could see there. It gives it a 3D feel. It makes me feel like I could grab a crayon and interact with the mouse, right? So the illustrations make me feel like I'm in the story with them, right? And although not every ounce of the page was used, everything was done concisely and with intention, right? And you can see here when I speak on the emotion that you won't get from the text, right? Ultimately, the story is of a mouse asking the boy for a cookie to start. The boy gives the mouse the cookie, and then the mouse ends up asking him for a million things after that, over and over and over, right? So you can see with the images, the mouse is having the time of his life. I mean, you could tell that from the images, right? The text says nothing about the mouse having fun or the boy being tired and being overwhelmed. However, we get that from the illustrations, from the lines and colors being used. We have more kind of neutral colors used with the boy, with the shading of his skin to the color of his sweater. It kind of makes it feel like you could tell the mouse is pretty much the main character here, and the boy is kind of just the support, as the boy is just constantly giving the mouse everything he wants. And then you can see here how the boy's just exhausted now, right? And the mouse is just not caring, just waking him up like, let's go. It's time to get me what I need left, you know? And the boy's exhausted. And all that emotion you get solely from the illustrations based off how the lines were formed and the colors that were used. And then you go into the for the medium used, right? You could see the aspect of cartoon drawing, right? I mean, the little boy looks like Caillou, you know, like definitely some cartoon drawing aspect there. However, you also have the pencil drawing medium utilized here as well. You could tell just by the shading of from the different colors. And on top of that, let me find the. Hopefully, I can show through the camera. But you see this picture of the boy? You see how the coloring of his shirt went outside of the line of his shirt. See here how it's not fully colored in all the way there of the outline of his head and hair as well. That gives the feeling like a child drew this and colored this, right? And maybe for a reader, and as the intended population is children, it gives them that feeling that maybe this is the perspective in a story that a child is giving, right? And it may allow a children reader to feel more welcome to reading this, as he feels maybe it was one of his peers that wrote this story or created this story, and then it allows their imagination to kind of run and interpret this the way they want to, right? In terms of the choices the author and the illustrator made, I feel it was perfect. I feel I wouldn't change anything. The illustrations was very clear in terms of equating to exactly to what the text was giving us. It didn't overwhelm the reader or won't, because the text is strictly the illustrations is strictly to the text. um, the colors was vibrant enough to where you feel like you want to interact with it. However, kind of rustic enough to where you really feel like you're at home just listening to a story. The entire setting of this book took place in a home, but the way the images was constructed, the colors, the everything, it made you feel like you was on an entire adventure when this entire setting was just in someone's home. All you saw was a kitchen, a room, and a bathroom, and you feel like you took an entire course of adventure with these two characters, right? The illustrator also utilized the well with this mouse, right? It's one of those anthropomorphized animals where we got a jump shoot on the mouse. The mouse is asking for constant things like cookies and a broom and wants to sweep, and it personified an animal, right? That wouldn't normally have any of these traits of a human, and that allows the a different level of entertainment for children. It honestly made me want to read it, which is why I love a story that's intended for students and children. However, I feel even the message it portrayed is beneficial for adults too, right? So the story started off by saying if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. When you give him the milk, he'll probably ask you for a straw. When he's finished, he'll ask for a napkin. And it's constantly going that when you give him one thing, he's going to ask for another. When you give him one thing, he's going to ask for another. And then as the story continues, it goes on to then he'll want to draw a picture. When the picture's finished, he'll want to sign his name. So then he'll need a pen. And then he's going to want to hang it on the refrigerator, which means he's going to need tape. And then looking at the refrigerator, it reminded him he's thirsty. So he'll ask for a glass of milk. And the chances are, if he asks for a glass of milk, he's going to want a cookie to go with it. So literally the entire story went in a huge circle. He started off with the boy giving him a cookie, ended the story with him leading back to wanting another cookie. And I feel like the morals this gave us, the message it kind of displayed, I took it in a couple of ways, right? One, be careful who you give things to, right? Anyone could have a friendly face and seem like they're on our side and anything like that, but you truly never know someone until you really start interacting with them, right? So you need to be very careful with who you give what to. On top of that, another thing I took from this story was how we need to make sure we tend to ourselves first before constantly tending to someone else over and over and over. And now I took that straight from the illustrations because as we saw, the mouse had no problem asking for things. And the whole time he's just happy in his own world, calm, and just having the time of his life. And the entire time, look, he's just laying there looking like he's a little kid having so much fun. And then every illustration of the boy, you see it get more and more hectic for him, more stuff in his hand. And he just hasn't cracked a smile the entire story, right? And then it shows him sleeping and the mouse ready to ask for another thing. And then ultimately, through all that, he's just drained and down. And that's what that showed me, that if you constantly are a giver, a giver, a giver, but you never take the time to give to yourself, you will end up crashing and not being able to ultimately make the same decisions you would or live life the way you would, because now you're prioritizing everything but yourself, right? um Amongst so many other things, and just these little morals and messages I took from this story confirmed that it is probably for children in their adolescent years, as a toddler won't be able to interpret this story in that manner. um they'll probably just think like, oh man, I don't want a pet mouse, it seems like they're a lot of trouble, right? But as we're older, we're able to kind of see those hidden messages in a text like this. So maybe even I feel the intended audience probably stems from like 6 7 years old, even up to like 12 years old. It may be a little too simple in text for a 12 to 13 year old, but I feel like the morals here is beneficial for anyone. Right. So the author and illustrator did a great job of kind of making it feel welcoming and warm, and as if you were going to have a good time reading this story. It gave that feeling that you're going on an adventure, while literally the setting being in just a simple household. And also while teaching a very valuable lesson in terms of how we deal with society and how we deal with ourselves. Right. So I would 100% recommend um, this story to a variety of the population, honestly. As long as anyone that's old enough to interpret it, I feel would benefit from this extremely. Um, Even adults, I know an adult probably wouldn't even read this story in terms of trying to actually learn something from it, but um, it would be extremely beneficial for anyone in any age range. Now, in terms of accessibility, I mean, you can get this book online from anywhere from $3 to $5, so it's pretty accessible, which is pretty dope. Honestly, I never even heard of this book until this one, and everyone said they read it a million times. I had no idea. Um, but we love a book that gives a good message. And I believe that's about it. Sorry, I just want to make sure answered everything. Uh, yeah, I mean, it was a great read. I feel the way it was constructed, they lived out everything they intended to when they created this book. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. I know I talked a lot, but I really appreciate it. Please let me know what you think. If there's anything I could have done differently. Thank you so much.